Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesko with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it.
Hey, Tesk, we're kind of like copying each other's swag a little bit today. Gray t-shirt, dad hat.
You got good style, my friend.
You do too, bro. I like it.
I like it.
I like it.
Yo, have y'all heard that house song? I don't know what it actually is, but I heard it at Shambhala, where like the lyrics are, it's this like girl rapping. She's like, I like my snapback some backwards and my dad hat some forwards. My mind is gone, but my footwork is flawless. I gotta look that song up because I remember jamming my ass off to that song.
That's
and
bars.
The lyrics are still with me like 10 months later.
That's how you know it's bars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, you still had them memorized. Like, are you sure? You
For
don't
real.
all the time?
I mean, it was like a very like pivotal moment. I just like at the amp had just smoked chonga for the first time. Nice. And then like once I could see again, stood up and went and danced. And then that song started playing. And so it was like my first word. Chonga is like DMT bark. So it's not like you actually smoke the bark instead of smoking the rendered down powder.
Isn't it? I thought it was like toxic to you unless like I thought the whole point of ayahuasca was because the bark itself is toxic, so you have to brew it with whatever else that thing is to like
no. So what it is DMT is when you light it on fire and you inhale it, you blast off to the next dimension right away. But if you eat it, we all have this thing called monoamine oxidase, which is a stomach enzyme that immediately denatures and deads DMT. And DMT is in all sorts of stuff. It's in like everything. I think it's in like lettuce and strawberries and all sorts of shit. But when you eat it, it's just like immediately dead. It just doesn't do anything to you. What ayahuasca does is, aside from being like an interesting, apparently it's a fairly interesting compound just to brew and drink on its own. I don't know. I've never done ayahuasca to this point, but it also contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. If you'll see it, MAOI.
Okay.
And
that
so
more familiar.
When you brew something with DMT in it and you brew something with an MAOI and then you put them together, then you have orally active DMT. So it's more like, it's like the mushroom version, the mushroom trip when you ate some mushrooms and then it takes a while you come up and then you come back down over 6 hours or whatever, as opposed to you blast off for 5-10 minutes and then come back to reality.
So how does chonga differ from DMT if you've smoked like DMT crystals?
I smoked. So it's actually the same person. The person Slow Form introduced me to at the festival that was camping next to her. It was a really cool dude, Andrew. And I met up with Slow Form at AMP, and she was with her neighbor. And like, oh, hey, like, hey, you guys want to smoke some chonga? I'm like, yes. What is it?
Crack rocks.
And he's like, oh yeah, it's this DMT bark. It's kind of like smoking DMT, but not like quite as intense. It's more like eyes open DMT. It's more like having an acid trip where like you're still seeing the world, but like it's like different. And like, so, I got the first hit off it. And like I didn't really get it lit all the way. I didn't know how fast it was gonna light, and I didn't want to be greedy because there was 4 of us. So I like just kind of lit it, and like my first hit didn't do much. It went around the circle a couple times, and then like after my last hit, I like really held it in because it was like the last hit. And they were like, "Oh, make sure you get the last hit," and blew it out and went whoa. And I closed my eyes and I started seeing the swirls, and I was like, "Wait, I kind of want to see what the world looks like." And opened my eyes, and we're sitting in the very back of the tent. And somebody walks in front of me like this, and when you've got like 2 mirrors or you're screen sharing your screen share and it goes brrr to infinity, it was like legs to infinity, just brrr. And it was raining out, so everybody's wearing all these colorful ponchos, but for like a full 5 minutes I thought I was actually seeing people's auras because their ponchos were these like these brightly colored see-through geometric shapes around them, and I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? on. And then after we went and danced to that song I just recited, we went back to this other spot. Evan, you know, like, what was that stage, like, past the Village?
The Grove.
Where they always had the Grove? Yeah, went back to the Grove, and they had all those, like, art installations, like the giant light-up mushrooms and stuff, and those, like, benches in the middle. And we sat there, and so there's all these, like, tree branches and, like, those hanging things with the pine cones attached to them, and then all the light-up stuff was behind that, and we smoked it again. And that time, my first hit, like, it was already cherried, and I got a couple of hits, and, like, you know when you, like, you're on acid or mushrooms and you, like, see, like, you could see, like, a sliver of light coming through a couple of branches or something, and you can, like, stare at it and, like, it expands and you feel like you're kind of diving into that little ray of light.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like that. I had been like, oh my God, I'm kind of going into some light. And this was like, I could just, like, look at a little sliver of light and just, whoom, like, my vision would, like, dive into it. I feel like I could, like, zoom my vision. And it all looked so cool. And, like, just, like, turning my head and, like, waving and vibing like this, like, back and forth, just to, like, make the shapes and the colors move and shit. And, like, oh, good times, man. And it was funny because Andrew, like, is sitting on the far end from me, and he looks down the line, and he's like, everybody, we're all, like, doing this weird, like, snake dance together, like, all in time. And we're like, yeah, holy shit, we are. And then the next day we went over to their camp. Me and my lady Jen went over to their camp, and they're like, hey, we've got DMT. Do you want to smoke the actual DMT? And that time it was like, instead of all of us doing it together and looking at the world, it was like one person at a time did it. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think only Jen and I did it because most of the other people had done it already. And like, so I went first and just we put it on top of a little bit of weed, and I just took this huge rip of it and faced the whole bowl and just closed my eyes and leaned back in the camp chair and, like, had this experience. Like, you know, there's always, like, you know, the voices that chime up in your head, and the more, like, anxious you are, it feels like more voices are kind of, like, trying to, you know, have their little say. And then sometimes, like, if you're, like, having a bad moment on drugs, it feels like maybe there's, like, a lot of voices going on and they're all kind of yelling at you. Well, this, like, first, I didn't hear any voices at all. And I am just sliding. I close my eyes and I'm, like, sliding down a tunnel of every color, but not quite any color. And on the sides of the walls, it's like these morphing shapes that almost become recognizable shapes, and my brain can make the connection of what it's about to be, but then it morphs and becomes almost something else. And it's all happening so fast, and it's all flying by me that it, like, kind of dawned on me really quickly, a few seconds, like, I'm not actually even supposed to be able to hold on to any of this. So I'm just going to let it go and enjoy the ride. And then, like, you know, that was evolving for a while. They had some music playing, so I'm just, like, you know, vibing to the music and watching this, like, whirlwind of colors and almost shapes fly by me. And then at some point I notice that there's this chanting, and all of those voices I was talking about for the first time in my life were all saying everything they were saying in unison, like a big chorus of all the voices of everybody who's ever been ever talking to me, saying the exact same thing. And they were saying above, behind, below, between, like, all of the prepositions before, after, you know, all of these, like, all the prepositions over and over, and just, like, all chanting them and chanting them and chanting them. And well, all this, like, water slide of color is happening. And, like, that by this time it's evolved. It's like these two rotating multi-tiered pillars where, like, that are going like this, and like the shapes are, like, on them, on the tiers, and like everything behind and around it is, like, all the colors, and it feels like all the voices are coming from, like, just out of my field of vision. They're all coming from back here. So, like, all the sounds back here and all the visuals, all the lights up here. And it's rolling and washing over me. And I'm, like, thinking, I'm like, oh, it's like all these are prepositions. It's all the things that are heading, like, to something, but not actually being something. Just like the shapes and the colors are, like, almost a recognizable shape and a color, but it isn't anything. So it's, like, interesting how this, like, oh, it's all, like, it was all starting to line up. And then once I got that, it started saying yes and like improv comedy. And I was like, okay, interesting. And then it started repeating this one phrase over and over: betwixt, between, B12, B12o, B12o, betwixt, between, B12, B12o, right? What the fuck does that mean? So betwixt,
Right.
between mean the same thing as exactly what I was just thinking, right? And then I started thinking about the other two: B12, B12o, B12, B12o, elbow. It's like an elbow, and elbow is like the preposition of the arm. It's not even like an actual thing. It's where 10 actual things meet up. It's like a party isn't like an actual thing. It's where 10 people or 20 people meet up. And okay, interesting. There's the connection. And in B12,
like running through your head in real time.
yeah, like they played like one long song.
Yeah. So like you were hearing these words, making sense of them. As soon as you made sense of them, you heard the next set of words.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, bro. Like, and like, this is a complete, like, my girlfriend smoked the DMT right after and had a completely different, apparently, like, she had one set of words right at the beginning. She thought it was me, but I'm pretty sure I didn't say it. I told her to breathe out eventually, because I think she was like still holding it or something, or maybe I told her to hold it, or I don't know what I told her. But then like at some point she's like a little nervous and kind of like holding on, and she hears the voice say, just relax, go with it. And then she did, and then she didn't hear any voices after that, and like just saw like this whole set of visual things that I don't think she was able to describe it as much for me, just because it wasn't as concrete of a thing as mine. But to get back to mine, to finish that up, it was like, betwixt, between, B12, B12. So I figured out betwixt, between, and B12, and on B12, B12, 12. That's the 12th letter, L. I'm L. Be me. Be myself. Be the connection between people. And like, and then it was like, yes, and. And then that calmest voice that comes up in the back of your head, like the truest one, the one that's not the ego posturing, the one that's not worries, the one that's not afraid, came up, and it was like, all the visuals you ever needed, which made me laugh out loud, because I had always like not seen as many crazy visuals on drugs as my friends had when doing mushrooms and acid. And they're like, oh my God, I'm seeing these crazy things over there. And I'm like, I see the trees and they look way cooler than I've ever seen, but it's still trees and you're not seeing trees at all. That's pretty nuts. I wish I was seeing what you were seeing. And I could always been like low key butthurt that I hadn't seen that kind of visuals. And then like my calmest voice is just laughing its ass off at me while I'm laughing back at it. Like, oh yeah, I can get over the butt hurt. Here's every bit of craziness I could have possibly ever wanted to see on drugs. And I just ignored it all to listen to this message from an ocean of love that was telling me these messages in a code that was basically a big inside joke personally for me, of me being like a word nerd and a lyricist. It was like chanting lyrics at me. And chanting all these, and like, because I'm a word nerd, the fact that it was all prepositions got me thinking, and then it like got more and more specific until I figured out the message. And then there was a couple of other things. Like at that point, the visuals started fading, like somebody was turning down the brightness on it, and the voices started fading away. And at one point, I was like,
Did you have your eyes closed this whole time?
Yeah. Completely closed eyes. At one point, I had a thought to open my eyes and see what it looked like, but I quickly dropped that thought because I was already seeing what I was supposed to see. And then like at one point, I remember that same voice. I was like, man, this is crazy. Like, I'm so glad I did this. And like that voice again, the calm voice said, every once in a while. Like, this isn't something you need to like abuse or do all the fucking time, bro. Like, this is a big thing. Just fucking come back every once in a while when you really need this, when it's the right moment, is what I got from that. And then for the first time, as it was fading, and after I had figured it out that it was like B12 was me, then I was like, literally had the conscious thought, let me see if I can do something. And I started thinking Luke motherfucking Rain, because I had pretty much abandoned the Luke Rain. I had just brought Luke Rain back. And then all of a sudden, all the voices were chanting Luke motherfucking Rain. And at the time, I took that to mean like I really needed to make this Luke motherfucking Rain song that I had thought I needed to make. And then I tried to later make that for the Say My Name cipher, and really tried to manipulate the shit out of that song, just like I manipulated the end of the drug trip. And and that taught me a whole lot of lessons about letting my ego die and moving on from that idea of me having to manipulate shit. So it allowed me, it's interesting, like in retrospect, the way I'm looking at it is like it allowed me to manipulate what the voices were saying so that I could have an ego, to build my ego up, to try and really manipulate my music, to get to the point where I realized that overproducing my shit and over manipulating my shit was, and making it about me, was exactly what I don't need to do. And I have to let my ego die as often as possible and really take a better approach of like allowing things. And like, I mean, shit, like that song that I made that I showed you guys yesterday for the music video for the sample pack, like that's like a really cool song, and literally all I did was throw together loops that I had on my computer. It's like, it's all shit I had just made for that sample pack, plus one kick that I had sitting on my computer that I made, and one bass loop that I had sitting on my computer that I made. And it's like a really fucking cool song that I really like. And it took me like part of 2 days to make that song. Like I started it one evening and I finished it the next afternoon. And that song is done and it's good. And I don't have to fuck with it anymore because it's not about me or how hard I work or how much I manipulate it. And so the whole arc of this whole thing has been really big.
That's awesome, man. That sounds like a crazy time. Everybody I've talked to that's done DMT has like, it's always been like drastically different from everybody I've talked to. And they've all said it's been like life-changing and like tapped into like certain subconscious things. Imagine next trip, they're like, no, vitamin B12. We need vitamins.
I know, that was my first thought. Like, vitamins? No, but dude,
yeah, right.
I don't know how you piece that together like so well.
The brain is so fucking cool. Like the fact that like everyone seems to have a similar response in which they have some sort of revelation that they have been probably stewing about in their subconscious mind, but hasn't brought to the forefront of themselves. Like, I just think that's so cool. There's so much happening that you don't realize, and that like there's so much like untapped potential of your thought and like thought exercises and stuff that just like normal states of mind and normal like everyday life, like you just never really give yourself the opportunity to tap into those kinds of things. And so like experiences like that just remind you that like, no, that's still the same brain that you have every day. You just like don't access that part, right? Which is just fucking cool. My big takeaway from that whole thing was that I need to go smoke some strawberries and see what happens.
Right. One crazy thing is that like you know, the burning bush that Moses talked to God through is been linked to possibly being the acacia bush, and acacia has DMT in it. So it's like, all right, you're sitting at the mouth of a cave and this bush is on fire and you're breathing the smoke and you talk to her. Yes, I believe you, Moses. You 100% talk to God.
100%. In that time, if you had that experience, you would write a book about it. For fucking
100%.
Sure you would. Like
or at least like chisel some good ideas on some stone tablets so you don't forget them. Like, oh, yo, I cannot forget. Yo, guys, we're not supposed to kill each other or bang each other's wives or steal. So let's not. I'm gonna chisel. I'm gonna chisel and then walk back down the mountain.
And then just leave it to fucking everyday Neanderthal human brain to turn it into some fucking conquest of power rather than the original message, which is like the gist of most religion for me, is that like there's a good message at the center and then some fucking dickhead turns it into a power struggle or a you're right and I'm wrong, or my belief is correct and yours isn't, or like some sort of weird thing that it's not. It's like there's good at the center of all that shit, And instead, religion has turned into the biggest force for killing and death that the world has ever seen. It's like, fucking great job, humans. Fucking good job, you know?
My favorite Jesus meme is one who is like, so the message is, you know, be kind and love everybody. And then one of the people standing around says like, oh, but what if they're gay or like have another skin color? Like, bitch, what did I just say?
Yeah, right?
There's actually pretty solid arguments to suggest that Jesus was probably black or very dark skinned.
Yeah.
And there was actually a very corrupt
He's a Middle Eastern dude, like for sure,
Right.
not. He
For
did
sure
not
not
look like
white.
me. I look like a Pope's son in the 15th century, vaguely.
So there
What's up, Cesare
was
Borgia?
exactly. I'm glad you guys know that story. There's also really interesting, like old pictures found depicting Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and the tree where they ate the apple from is actually this giant Amanita muscaria that's sprouting smaller amanitas. So there's people think like, you know, when people found this thing, they're like, all right, well, we can't let everybody communicate with God. Let's create these like higher priests, and they have the communication to God, and you're not allowed to take these drugs. We'll tell you what God says.
There's not enough for everyone. We got to figure out a way to make
there's not enough God for everyone.
That reminds me of the Show Me What You Got Rick and Morty episode where Principal Vagina is like, no, I'm the only one who gets to interpret the will of the giant heads.
Yes. There's also really interesting theory that that Christmas was actually based off of a shamanic holiday.
Yeah, we've
talked about it? Okay.
Oh, yeah, man.
Wasn't sure
I don't know if we
had.
talked about it on here, but yeah, I've heard that too, man.
Has the podcast started?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm cool with it.
Word.
I was wondering that too, though, man. I'm all in, man. I think people need to know, but you know.
Hey, man, in Canada, the revolution's happening already. I'm seeing like mushroom dispensaries popping up and stuff, which is pretty crazy stuff. It feels like how cannabis was like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, like when it was still legal, but police just stopped caring. And I think it's important for like, look, pros and cons for everything. I really hate when people just gas things up and just make it seem like it's the best thing ever. But I do think at least it'll be a huge step in the right direction for doing proper research, because it feels like people did some psychedelics, tapped into that, and they're like, whoa, there is so much we don't understand. Let's shelf that and make it illegal and make sure nobody looks at what that has to offer, because it totally shatters most things that we think we know about reality. And who knows what this life is, man? Like, truly, like, when you hear of, like, manifestation and, like, parallel universes theory and, you know, you hear, like, hippies talking about vibes. Like, I never got that truly until recently, and now I feel like that's like in the last few years, I feel like that's a great way to describe these things. And then there's also this idea, like, you know, I've talked to friends who are like really smart in physics, and this is just whatever, just shooting the shit with them, but like they all seem to really strongly believe in this idea. And I'm a Neanderthal when it comes to physics, but I find it fascinating. And this idea that everything is vibrating at a frequency, and if you align yourself to a higher frequency, quote unquote, you can, I don't know what, hop a timeline or attract certain things or whatever, seems like not that far-fetched. And who knows how much crazier it gets.
I mean, the brain actually vibrates at frequencies, and those frequencies change based on how you're feeling. You know, like there's a different frequency of brain waves for sleep than there is for like normal waking life, than there is for flow state, than there is for like being agitated and anxious. Like And there's actual scientific studies of people doing like those, that feedback where you can like monitor your brain waves and like gives you a tone based on what. Yeah, I've never done that, but I've heard people talk about it on podcasts and how like transformative it's been for them. And it's like, oh man, like, yeah, that makes so much sense. And you can like be around somebody and feel bad vibes. You're like, oh, this person over here hasn't said a word, but they're pissed, and I can feel it in the pit of my stomach. I'm not gonna mess with this person.
Yep.
But if you're pissed, that probably attracts you. Like, oh, maybe let's fight.
Yeah, totally.
Let's have a bar brawl because me and this dude are both drunk and angry. Like, I mean, that's not me. I've never started a bar brawl, but
right.
I think that's the vibe.
I want to know what frequency of flow state is, and then just get a tuning fork that sits in the fucking center of my studio and just get that shit going all day and just get into that fucking frequency. No, I definitely think, and there's a huge thing that I've been thinking about from time to time regarding like our ability to perceive the world around us, and our limited perception based on our five senses is just not necessarily enough of the full story. Like the reason like a gut feeling is a gut feeling is because your gut has like more receptors than like almost anywhere else in the body or something like that. Don't quote me scientifically.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of neurons in the gut.
Yeah, there's massive amounts of receptive potential in your gut that will likely receive those kinds of vibrations or like just senses that you can't put a finger on that are going to give you indications on things that like you don't have a physical sense to give you. And just like even down to like, and this is almost silly, but even down to like you're playing a game or something. Like y'all play Catan?
I haven't, but I know what you're talking about.
Oh my God. God damn it, you guys.
I haven't either, but everybody has that reaction.
So fun. Anyways, okay, so in this game, if you roll a 7, you get fucked. And every time you have like a bunch of cool shit and you're about to like just pwn people, you're like probably gonna roll a 7. And so like I really feel like there is just a baby dick amount of your own ability that you cannot sense to determine something as simple as the roll of a dice to be something that you don't want because you're focusing on it so hard. Like your own ability with the small amount of mass that you have to have some sort of perceptive ability to influence like gravity in like the smallest way. Like you'd never have a sense to be able to understand how or why that happened, but I fully think that it's possible on like a very micro scale, like maybe point like 1% of the time or something like that. Like if you're focusing hard enough on something like that, you could change the outcome. But like you just don't have any way to actually perceive those kinds of things, and it's so far-fetched.
At least not rationally.
Exactly, and it's the same thing, which is why like I can have that conversation with you guys, and you don't sit there and you go, "Fuck, you're so fucking stupid. Like that doesn't make any sense." Like you could have that conversation with someone and be like, "No, you're fucking dumb. You can't affect. Like you have 5 senses, dummy." Which is like the same reason that like for me the conversations of like mind expanding drugs, like for those that have tried them, the conversation you will have with someone about them is fantastic. It is shared experience. It is, wow, you felt this. That connects a similar thing that I felt. And it's just like a really like beautiful experience that you can share with someone. And to those that haven't, that live in fear of that experience or have been brought up to believe a certain thing about those things, you just can't, there's no reasoning with someone about that. It's just, you're a drug addict for doing that. So it's like tough to like put that in like a public space, in a public forum in which I know that like a lot of people would be like, wow, yeah, that's really insightful. This one thing happened to me this one time. And like, wow, I can't believe that happened to him. And like, that's a really interesting take on a similar thing that happened to me. But like, there's going to be like a certain contingent that's just like, the fuck? Like, no, like, they just don't understand it and aren't willing to see that side, you know?
It's interesting that the literature is so clear on the limited tests that we do have, that the people who have gone through these experiences have permanently been changed by it in a positive way months, years after taking that. And even once that sort of, like, I feel like after a mushroom trip, you're changed, like, I don't want to say drastically, but notably for a few months at least. And even still, like, thinking years back at my first mushroom trip, totally changed who I am as a person. And I know people that are listening that haven't done it are like, whatever, but it opened me up to connecting with human beings on a different level. Like that whole idea of us all stemming from the same consciousness. And it's really like the moment or the collective that's alive, and we're just like individual parts of that, much like how individual Legos create the whatever Star Wars spaceship or whatever. And then years later, I come to find out that the Tibetans actually have a word for this. Whatever, it's called Indra's net. And it's this idea that all consciousness are sort of connected in this net-like formation. And we're sort of like vessels channeling this one thing that is consciousness, but we're not as individual as we actually think.
We're nodes on that net.
Exactly. So I found that really interesting years later, that like this is like, okay. And so it kind of brings it to another point where I kind of realized like every single thought that we have, like 99% of thoughts we have been thought by people before us. So 99% of what we think really isn't unique. And Evan, you sort of touched on this.
Everything really is a remix.
Everything is a remix. Man, my mind's jumping all over the place because this is such a crazy topic and like there's so much to talk about here. But I'm gonna leave it off at this. I've been reading this book by Aldous Huxley called Doors of Perception, and there's this really interesting idea that they bring up, referencing a study that was done when they were messing around with mescaline and like seeing how it affects consciousness. And they came to conclude that our central nervous system isn't a perceiver per se. It's more so a very specified filter for a specific experience. And I can't recall if it was in this book actually, but there's this idea that like if God is, if you want to believe in God as whatever, an entity or as a higher power or as consciousness itself, if you believe that this idea of a creator, to whatever extent you want to say, is omnipotent and has this massive potential, perhaps the one thing that it's missing that is just as godlike is some sort of limitation. And so our limited like receiver of very specific inputs that we're getting that creates this experience is godlike in its own right. And
maybe God is just creation in and of itself. And we love to anthropomorphize everything and make everything 3D with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. But, I mean, shit, like people even gave God a dick. Like, why is God male if God is everything? Chill out. Like, God is the totality.
Sorry, not to cut you off. I was just going to say, I think that ties into the idea of like creation. At first I was like, how arrogant to like just assume God is a male. But I think that, and don't get me wrong, like females are more responsible with creation. I think when you look back at religion, like it's easy to point out like the sort of negatives of it. But I think there was this very strong like admiration for the divine masculine, divine feminine, and it coming together to create. But on a different note, I wanted to bring up like just that idea of creation. Like if we think of, let's say, quote unquote, God as creation itself, I've always drawn parallels between like making music and like prayer or worship or something along those lines, because I've never felt like I'm the one making music. It just feels like I'm tapping into this thing that's in the ether, and I'm just being a channel for this thing to come out. Because I don't know where these ideas come from sometimes. And I was actually talking with people at work about like some like the top physicists and mathematicians and stuff like that, how they would just get a hunch and like, you know, when you have that idea mentally and you're like, everything is clicking and I don't know how it's clicking, but I know that this could be a thing. And then you reverse engineer it from there and put the pieces together. Like, to me, that is divinity. That is divine. Like, that is, man, like, I don't even know the words to like express that properly, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about, right? You like tap into that frequency and you let it flow through you. And then
that's
in a few hours, you have this thing.
And that's, I'm sure, what Zomboy was thinking when he made Terrorsquad.
Shots fired.
Man, like, I mean, to be,
Luke,
what's up?
Tesko, I'm sure it seems like you do. Luke, do you know the full story of that?
I mean, he was tapping into Skrillex, which is God.
Okay, so Zomboy made this song called Terrorsquad that came out before this song that Skrillex was making, and it comes to later light after Skrillex releases a song called All Is Fair in Love and Brostep, that Zomboy, after a recent studio visit to LA where he was hanging out with Skrillex and a bunch of other producers and they were playing each other whips, Zomboy inadvertently went home and had this melody in his head that he didn't know where it came from and made this tune called Terrorsquad and then released it before Skrillex released his. And fuck, man, it is uncanny how close that shit is, dude. It is fucked up. Like, the drop is the exact same shit. All right, history lesson. We're going to go play both of them back to back because we need to. This is what we do. We dive into the depths of these intricacies.
While you're bringing it up, I want to throw out this thing that you guys have been making me think of right now. In that dope book, The Artist's Way, Chapter 7 begins, and the last time I saw that book sitting on a friend's table, I just randomly opened it, and it opened to the beginning of Chapter 7, and it's like a lot of people who want to be creatives think that the issue is sitting down and thinking something up, like that ego-driven, like it's got to come from me, and I've got to wrangle this thing into place, where the real thing is you just got to show up and get something down. That's why I tell my students, like, look, every melody, every rhythm, every chord progression, all exist. Even if nobody's used them yet, it already exists in the possibility of mathematical music. So, like, stop worrying about if it's, like, the most original thing. Just lay shit down as you think of it. Like, if you realize later on your hit song that, oh, man, like Sam Smith, I Will Stay With You, is the exact melody of I Won't Back Down by Tom Petty. And he ended up realizing that, and they're like, yo, that's our melody. He's like, oh, shit, yeah, well, I made like $10 million. Here's half of that, or whatever it ended up being. But, you know, shit, worst case scenario, you give Tom Petty's estate some money. That's cool.
Yeah, totally.
Keep making music.
Pray to God you are successful enough with that piece of music that the rights owner actually fucking cares.
Yeah, that's a blessing.
Conversation I have with a lot of my students about that kind of issue is, I think 99% of people are preemptive on that shit because it's never going to reach enough ears that someone's going to actually come after you. That being said, be careful with your copyrights, kids. Like, don't fuck around with that. But the chances are you're just not going to make enough of a splash with it for someone to fucking really care and be like, we want 69 cents of your dollar that you made on streaming, you know, like, no. All right, I have this.
I mean, they might, but like, that's a good problem. Power by Kanye West. That song was a real sample of a real band, and Kanye got excited. And I know the dude who made that beat, S1 from Waco, Texas, super dope dude. He made the beat. he sampled it, showed Kanye, he knew he sampled, but Kanye got excited and put the leak to the song before they got it cleared.
Ugh.
And
Now you're
those guys took 80%. They legally could have, like dude said, man, it was nice of them to only take 80. They literally could have taken 100% because we didn't do it right. Yeah. But they decided, to give us 20%. And it's a little stinging every time I see my check from Power and realize that it could have been 5 times larger. But that song made his career complete. It was his first big hit, and he since has gone on to work with Jay-Z and Beyonce and Madonna and Gladys Knight and all these other ginormous names because of that moment. It's all right, man, just go with it. Yeah. Don't worry so much. Make music.
Definitely.
All right, what's up, Zomboy?
All right, this is the one that Zomboy made. This came out before Skrillex's version, but was made after. Gonna skip ahead to the drops because the drop is what you want to listen to.
It's fucking Zomboy.
All right, cool. I get it. Let's not get our podcast pulled. Speaking of copyright, don't want to get muted on Facebook.
You're gonna have to time warp that to be slightly pitched down or slightly pitched up. Skrillex.
All right, creating more work for the podcast producer. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you just cut this whole section out, I guess. Fuck.
We'll see. I've done it before.
That's fair. In love and Brostep. All right. The thing that gets me is I understand that first rhythm is not necessarily the most recognizable. The thing that gets me is even the B section is the exact same. Dun, 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 dun. Fuck, man. And the sounds exactly the same. Damn.
Yeah, no, I feel it, man. I've definitely been making songs and halfway through realized, I'm changing this melody because I'm 100%. It just hit me where I got it from.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had other times where I was in the studio with a vocalist, in the writing room, and we're oh yeah, I got this lyric and this melody. Check it out. I'm oh, that's 100% a so and so song. No, you forgot that you heard that, but it's too uncanny. You came up with the same melody, the same cadence, and the same words with one different word. I'm pulling it up on my phone right now and playing this for you. Oh shit, you're right.
Yeah, how do you tastefully work through that when you're in the studio with someone and they come up with an idea that's clearly ripped from someone else?
If it's produced, mudpie it. If it's lyrics, type that shit into Rhyme Zone and find a whole bunch of other words, or switch up the flow, or just bring something new to the table. It doesn't need to be 100% new. It shouldn't be 5% different, but make it 40% different. Do something else for the B section. Do something else for, the cadence, the phrasing, or whatever. Or just, if it's a lyric, take it from the artist, but then the next line, pay homage to that artist somehow. Work their name in. Make it known that it's a reference to that artist so that your fans go check them out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't hide
rappers
the fact.
do that all the time. Like Dead Prez, one thing about music, when you hit if you feel no pain, that's 100% a Bob Marley line. One thing about music, when it hits you, you feel no pain.
Yeah.
It was like, but that's clearly, it's like that was what they were listening to, and then they started writing a rap, and the first of 16 bars is a direct lift from Bob Marley, and then there's 15 completely original bars after that.
Yeah.
Situation I'm referencing, I just kind of stood my ground with the artist, and I was like, look, I didn't do it accusatory or in a way where I was like, no, you're stealing. It was like, yo, I don't know if you remember this song, but it seems like you've definitely heard it because it's in the back of your mind. Let me play this shit for you so that you can see how close this really is.
Yeah.
And then sometimes shit gets through. Like, do y'all know that Charlie XCX song? I don't want to go to school. I just want to break the rules.
Yes.
Big pop hit.
Yeah.
I just heard a song on my Spotify Discover Weekly on Friday that the lyrics are really, I don't want to feel this way. I just want to be okay. And I'm trying to remember who it was. There's like this brand new EDM track, and it's like literally the exact same cadence, the exact same melody in the same key at the same tempo, and it changed up the ending of each line. I don't want to blah, blah, blah. I just want to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, yeah, like I couldn't, and it was fucking, like for me as a listener, I was like, I really like this song, but it's fucking with me that they stole everything about this vocal from Charlie. And then I'm going back through my head, like, did they really steal this? Did they know it? Were they listening? And then that's where we go again. Like, is all consciousness connected? And are we all just downloading shit? And is everything really a remix? Which it seems like it is. Because, I mean, man, like, one funny story is I had my very first rap EP I ever put out back in the day, and I worked so hard on it. I put it out and I submitted it to like the local paper, the Seattle Weekly, like, hey, you can pay them a little money and they'll do a review, a one paragraph blurb about your thing on their review of new releases page. And it was like, oh yeah, Luke Rain, he's definitely a solid MC and he's got pretty good beats on it, but his style just isn't completely original. And I was like, huh. And I showed it to my friend who's a rapper, and he's like, what the fuck they mean not completely original? Like you use like beats and notes and English? Nobody's completely original. It made me feel so much better. This guy, shouts out to One Below, one of my favorite rappers of all time, who gave me that dope moment as a young MC.
Yeah.
Remind me not to worry too much.
At least one thing that 100 Gex can rest their hat on, I don't think anyone's going to say that.
I mean, there definitely is the whole like PC music movement right now, which has been like driven by the LGBT community, and that sort of like high pitched sort of vocals came from people like transitioning and not being comfortable. From what I could tell, maybe I'm totally butchering this, but from what I see, it has really deep roots in the LGBT community. People transitioning, not being happy with their voice, and then just chopping it and screwing it and trying to make it sound more cutesy, more girly, more whatever. And I think they sort of played on that, but the thing is, too, I think why they blew up was they took this, I don't want to say formula, but they took these elements from pop music and hip hop and ska that people loved and worked, and their arrangements and their, even the production is unique in a sense, but it's like everything coming together is what made that so unique. But all of the individual parts, you can find really strong connections with that in other genres.
Took the words right out of my mouth, man. Well said.
And yeah, in all fairness, I'm not super plugged into the PC music type stuff. So yeah, I mean, maybe even 100 Gex isn't completely original. Although I will say, I'm pretty sure that song, I Need Help Immediately. I'll
give them that one.
Because there is literally not even a musical phrase in that song. It is just random fucking noises from all genres There's like a random dubstep growl right in the middle of it, catches you off guard. The only thing that actually plays twice is the "I need help immediately" sample, but it's not even processed the same. So, not to rehash the whole 100 gex thing again, but I did have another point that I wanted to make on the collaboration front, which is
we've only talked about 100 gex like 5 times, so we have at least 95 more gex to talk about.
One per gex.
They are the ideal use case for making music that is remarkable. Purple cow ass shit, like
remarkable as fuck. Yeah, man, that you can definitely talk about it. We can't shut up about it.
You're going to, yeah. Most people are going to tell you that it fucking sucks, but they're definitely going to tell you that because it triggered them enough to be like, I hate this, and they're still going to remark on it, which means that's good PR for you.
But see, the thing is, when you listen to an artist the first time and you're like, what the fuck? And then you're like, I couldn't fully digest that. Let me hear that one more time. And then you're like, I kind of get it. And then the third time you're like, okay, I see what they're going for. And then by the 5th time you're like, feel so clean like a money machine. Fuck yeah.
No, dude, I'm talking about like my wife. Like I played that shit for her. It was like, turn this fucking garbage off. Why are you even playing this right now? It is so bad. I can't listen to this.
Are you angry at my ears?
Why are you playing this on a Saturday? You're just ruining the Saturday right now. It's like, I think a lot of people would have that reaction. But moving on.
Better than indifference. And there's one more thing I want to say on that too. And I might have brought this up before, but there's a awesome quote I heard from somebody, and I can't remember where I heard this from, but they said, you send your music out, ask people what they absolutely hate about your stylistic choices, and double down on that.
Bro, you did on the 100 gex episode, man.
Did I? Beautiful.
Yeah, dude.
Again.
On the one we couldn't shut up about it, bro. And I was like sitting here with my fingers crossed, like, say it again, say it again. Yes.
It's so important.
People need to hear that, man. Like, polarizing shit, like we've been studying marketing. It's about finding that niche of people that really like this specific thing you're doing or the specific product or offer you're giving more than trying to please everybody. Because the more you try to please everybody, the more you got to water it down, and then it doesn't grab anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Your elevator music. You cannot get offended by elevator music. You can be bored to sleep by it, though.
True.
Yeah, and all you need is 1,000 true fans to be making like a doctor's salary off your music. If you can provide $100 worth, you can provide $100 worth of value to those fans that fucking love your music. Who cares if 1 million people hate it? Those 1,000 fans are going to be so diehard about what you do. And there's that bond, like when you're weirdos together about something you're passionate about and nobody else gets it, it becomes like a family. And that's one thing I noticed, like dubstep's a bit more mainstream, but like when I was getting into it, I noticed this. And when I was in the metal scene, I noticed this. It's just like a bunch of weirdos coming together and bonding over this thing that the rest of society doesn't really understand. And as soon as, like, you could be going about your day wherever you are and someone's like, oh, I listen to metal, or, oh, I listen to this underground hip hop group, or, oh, I'm into dubstep. You're like, yo, all right, tell me more, best friend. Like,
yeah. Totally.
What's good?
And then it gets too popular, and those same kids are like, oh, that's just lame now. Everybody likes it now.
Yep.
I mean, like, Macklemore in the hip-hop community is one of those polarizing forces. Like, millions of people love his music, and millions of people hate him for that. And it's like, man, I remember, like, before most people knew who he was, because he's from Seattle, so I've known about him forever. I've gone to his shows before, anybody knew who he was. And like everybody who knew about him was like, oh, this guy's so great. Everybody, I want to tell my friends, he's so good. He's definitely going to be the next one.
Oh, this is so sick. Seattle's finally got a guy in the hip hop game.
Yeah.
Fucking do it.
And then as soon as he actually blew up, then all of a sudden a bunch of the local public, that same Seattle Weekly who was hating on my EP, was like, did a cover story of a drawing of sad-eyed Macklemore holding a sad-eyed puppy. And the headline was like, is this really who we want representing our city musically?
Yep.
And it's like, we finally get somebody else from our music scene to blow up, and the first thing you do is a takedown piece. And there's like nothing, you're not even saying anything bad about him. You're saying, well, he's like talking about these issues, and he seems like he's like kind of, you know.
The thing is, both of those opinions, love and hate, come from that same place of passion, just from a different perspective, whereas indifference doesn't come from anywhere. It's indifference. It's whatever. You want somebody to say, this is dog shit. Even better if they're like, this is so dog shit, you gotta listen to this right now. And you know one of those friends they show is like, yeah, this sucks. And then they go home and they're like, what was that called again? This is pretty dope.
Put that on my playlist real quick.
There is a distinction though, because I would say someone that is like acting at like a higher level of consciousness than the dude that's just fucking angry at the Seattle Weekly that writes hateful shit because he's jealous that he can't make good music himself.
Just
like,
throwing this out there, that's that entire paper.
Yeah. Dude, that's the thing. Like, that kind of culture breeds those thoughts within it and then fucking spews it out at a grand scale. But, like, the same the person that goes, this shit fucking sucks, or this shit is fucking whack as shit, but you need to listen to it. That person is actually, like, thoughtful and, like, understands the beauty in the art even though they don't like it. And then there's the person that goes like, oh, this is garbage, like blah blah blah, that like either they don't understand it or they just like want to have the opinion of not liking it because it provides more power and an argument. There's a big distinction there between someone that and like the original point that I was thinking of is like indifference doesn't necessarily mean that that person doesn't have an informed opinion. Indifference actually might mean that they are a real music lover. They are an informed critic of that subject and they appreciate what that person is doing, but don't think that the execution was right. Or like, maybe they're just like, well, they didn't quite get it. You know, like I would say that is a form of indifference that comes from a good place.
I don't know if indifference is appreciation, because to me, indifference, and I agree, indifference usually comes from people that are really into music. And the reason they're indifferent is like, oh, like, cool, like they're doing this thing that X band is doing already. And like, it just sounds like a carbon copy of this band and they do it better because that's their sound. So I'm just going to listen to them. But what the thing when you have a group or an artist or whatever that can bring multiple influences and they converge and they're well mixed, usually like, okay, maybe there are different kinds of indifference. Like maybe somebody could just be like, oh, it's cool, but like the execution is just like not my taste or whatever. But I'm talking more the indifference
more like discernment
of like
than indifference. Like,
sure.
Just like showing deference is like having an emotive opinion, and indifference is not. Like I heard it and I didn't think any more about it. Like, okay, next song, whatever.
That's true.
I feel like that comes from when a band is copying or an artist is copying another artist's sound, whereas you can have somebody listen to it and be like, it doesn't do anything for me. But you don't want somebody to be like, well, why would I listen to Rip Kenny when this person does this exact thing and I could listen to them?
Yeah. Why would I listen to Zomboy when Skrillex put out the same song?
Because Zomboy put it out first.
Much love to both of them, but they're both dope.
Skrillex, Zomboy already made this song. Skrillex copied him. You know, like that is the perfect cauldron of discontent.
Hey, all's fair in love and Brostep, yo.
Exactly.
Oh my god. As I was playing those for you guys, I was having the thought, and I do have a thought about fucking collabs that I want to get back to.
Yes.
Eventually. But as I was playing those two for you guys, I had the thought, like, fuck, that sound is like the exact same, and like that B section riff is the exact same. I wonder if Skrillex went back after hearing Zomboy release the first one and be like, this motherfucker, I'm going to change some shit to make it sound even more like what he made, and then tell the story of what happened so that there is no doubt.
Has Skrillex ever done like one questionable thing ever? I feel pretty inclined to trust him.
I trust the fuck out of that guy. He seems like the nicest guy ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although
he
there was a
handled that well.
period there where so many of those like early adopter dubstep fans were hating him because it was our private little sub niche genre that nobody listened to but us, and now he just gave it to everybody. I hate him. He's the worst. And then he just kept making incredible music, and all those people eventually shut up.
When now we have to innovate.
Yeah, I was like, when they were all mad, I was like listening to some of the stuff that they're like, this is the real dubstep. And I'm like, I mean, as a rap and pop music fan that's getting into EDM, I like Skrillex better, and that's probably why you hate it.
I mean, the real dubstep resurfaced like 2-3 years ago as rhythm, and now that's like, now that's the new wave.
Yo, I love
quote unquote new wave.
I love how Dylan talked about that on the dub music weekly download recently, where he's like, yeah, well, dub music was the stuff from Jamaica, and then dubstep was this like kind of dubby, chilled out electronic thing, and then Americans took and made it aggro as hell. And then they're like, all right, well, what we're doing isn't that, so we'll call it rhythm, which is like another Jamaican vibey concept. And then Americans are like, yeah, rhythm, we'll make it aggro as hell. Metal.
That's America. Bigger, better, more freedom, more eagles, more stars,
Bigger gun.
bigger guns.
Oh yeah.
Politics.
Yeah. Burn it all down. And then get mad at people for burning it down.
I mean, see, I like hearing the differences that different areas will bring to a sound. Like I think we're mostly exposed to that because we're here in the Western world, but like hearing like UK dubstep artists still, there's a bunch, that are doing like the more American sound, but there's a bunch too that are doing their own thing. Or you look at like drill or something, which originated in Chicago, and it was this way more aggressive form of, I mean, it's not that simple, but like, let's just say it's an offshoot of rap. And then
I mean, it is for
like,
sure.
Yeah, but it's like, I just don't want to make it seem that simple because it's got like its own, differentiating factors. And then you hear like UK drill, and then there's like Australian drill, and there's like
Brooklyn
New Zealand drill. Yeah, even
Came
in
all
different
the way
parts of
back
America.
around the world.
100%. So I don't know. That whole idea of everything is a remix, I think, is really important. And if there's like one main takeaway I want people to take away from this is not getting caught up in like, because I do like quite a few sessions with people where they'll tell me like, I'm feeling writer's block, like everything I'm writing, like I just can't make something original and whatever. And I'm like, okay, fine. If you don't feel like your ideas are original, at least make the converging of your ideas original. Like take folk blues and combine that with electronic and hip hop, and bam. I have not heard that. And if it's been done, it's been done by like 2 people.
It's on the way. Me and Chauncey got a collab coming.
Word.
I'm actually I got to hit him up. I'm really excited about that one.
Hell yeah. So, all right, throw in another influence there. Bam, now you got something unique. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know there's a song that your mom played as a kid that is very nostalgic to you, and you could pick out a few elements from that and combine it with something you were super passionate about in your teen years, and combine that with something that you listened to yesterday. Bam.
Yeah. And that seems to be the cycle of pop music. I mean, for real, it's like, what was super nostalgic to the people who are making the most popular music in the world now? Like, what was the thing they were all about when they were a kid? So that's why we've got all these 80s and 90s records coming back in 2020. It's like the Weeknd's on this 80 tip, and like last year, Bruno Mars and Cardi B were on that like super new jack swing, Yeah. And it always goes like that. And I remember being a kid and like listening to Puff Daddy records and Biggie records and Tupac records and be like, this is the shit. And then like 6, 8, 10 years later, listening to like old vinyl I found and be like, oh, that's where that came from. That record was from 1973. Oh, it all makes sense now because those dudes in the 90s We're all raiding their parents' record collections.
100%. Yeah, I feel like that's really important because everybody's looking for that nostalgia factor. And whether it's fashion, whether it's like visual aesthetics, like you see in like, I feel like the SoundCloud rap community really brought forward that like VHS old aesthetic for like music videos and stuff. And then everybody from other genres hopped on that. And now that's a thing. And then like now the trend is degrading audio, degrading video, trying to like get that feel of like recording stuff on like this bulky camera on tape and like shooting pictures on film, like, and then in 20 years shit's going to get even more advanced. It might be VR, and then people are going to be like, man, like, remember 2020, like, we want to degrade our VR to look like that, or whatever it ends up being.
It just looks like HD video. How crazy.
Right.
It's like 2D and everything. Bobby, speaking of SoundCloud rap, like, another perfect talk about this mash of genres. They took brand new trap beats and mixed them with like 2000s era pop punk vocals. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you sound like your Blink 182 like over a little Uzi beat. And it's like perfect. Like, okay, sick. I guess it was a little Uzi doing it like over a Metro Boomin beat or whatever. And It's like, yeah, okay. This is like that nice nostalgia. So the kids who didn't go through that era get to have it for the first time. And the folks who are a little bit older who have strong nostalgic ties to that era, but also like new music, get that, oh shit, it's what I loved back then. It's back. Yes.
100%. I find it really interesting too. That's a great example because when it first started, I feel like people didn't think about it much more than like, let's put guitar over a trap beat. And then it was, let's introduce these vocals. And now you have, artists like Nothing Nowhere versus Juice WRLD, RIP, right? Who are doing like the same thing, kind of. It stemmed from the same thing, but would you really call Nothing Nowhere trap? Like Juice WRLD is definitely in the hip hop world, but now you have this offshoot that's like emo with 808s. It's more emo than it is hip hop. But they both stemmed from this converging of genres, and now that's shot off and blossomed into multiple different avenues.
Yeah.
I love Nothing Nowhere, by the way. That song, Clarity and Kerosene, is...
Shoutouts to him.
Such a beautiful combination of genres. Like, woo-wee. Like, taking that, like, full-on, like, fuck you pop punk emotion with like catchy lyrics and then putting it over like a hip hop beat. Like he does what he does really well. There's also like a whole wave of like fucking sad boy and sad girl, sad whoever, sad people, like emo vocals that are like dark and weird over like weird, like under-processed beats. Mm-hmm. And I also love that movement. Like I love how raw that shit is. Like Lil Bo Weep. Like I don't know if you guys know.
I've heard of him.
Download with her. Which
she's on the weekly download.
Turned me on to her music.
Cool.
I love her shit, and I found a bunch of related artists through just fucking Spotify after hearing about her from the weekly download, and like. It spawned a birth of a whole new playlist like of music for me on Spotify that I absolutely love listening to now, which is all that like kind of like sad pop punk, but like darker vibes. The playlist is called Summon Demons and Chill. If you want to listen to it on Spotify, you can go find that on my profile.
Send me a link to that. I'll put it in the show notes.
Excellent.
Yeah, totally. I'm so excited. I don't know how this one slipped by me. I'm super stoked to check her out.
Yeah.
I'm all about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing, too, people, like, bringing in metal with trap. Like, it started with, obviously, that SoundCloud era, and it spun off into artists like Scarlord, or you have the aggressive style of, like, XXXTentacion. I feel like brought it to the forefront, maybe. Well, I don't know. That's debatable. But you like prominent artists nowadays are like, you know, Scarlord is really like taken that sound, brought it forward. It's cool, man. It's cool to see like all the different ways, because now you have somebody like Scarlord who's coming from that trap background and doing more so hip hop infused with metal. And then you have metal artists that saw that and they're like, yo, let's do metal infused with hip hop.
Yeah.
And now these two genres are sort of breeding, and they're going to offshoot into their own things. Who knows if it's going to be like progressive metal trap and thrash metal trap, and then it's going to be like metal trap and metal boom bap and metal whatever. So it's super exciting.
One of like kind of part of the genesis of the project I'm doing now is that like a lot of metal guys will put electronic elements in their music, but it's still 80% metal, and then you have like an electronic section or like an electronic breakdown, or guys like Sullivan King that are really good at the opposite, which is 80% electronic and then 20% metal. And that metal comes from a metal section where there is metal drums, metal guitar, and it's like, here's the metal section of the song, build up, and then a dubstep drop. Like what I want to do is like 50-50 of both and have like the full integration of both vibes in a way that it's not like, oh, they put electronic shit in that song. Oh, they put metal shit in that song. I want it to be like, oh, this is that vibe that you loved when you were a teenager listening to Linkin Park, but it's just a little bit more new sounding. I don't know.
You have reanimated into new metal.
You've
reanimated reanimation.
Amen.
I feel like you're pretty there, homie. Like
we're still getting there.
There's a lot of bands that are trying to do it in their own unique way. There's a lot of artists that are, you know, solo trying to do it their own way. And the beautiful thing about that is there's so many different ways to combine it. Like I feel like you're on your own wave, and I could totally see you influencing other artists in like 5-10 years to like go down your route of doing that. And there's going to be other prominent artists. They're going to spawn their own little subgenres and so on. And I want to bring this to something I heard in a podcast with Charlie Rocket. Shout outs to Charlie Rocket. If you guys don't know who he is, he's so awesome, super fascinating human being. He talks about
my guy Micro is actually like working with him. Actually, a couple of my friends are actually working with him pretty heavy right now, and been telling me about his whole Pink Door situation.
Quantopia.
Yeah, Quantopia.
Man,
yeah.
we should we'll leave
it's a
Charlie
secret.
Rocket. Yes, but he's very inclusive about it, and I have so much respect for what the guy's doing. I hope I just get to like shake his hand and be like, bro, music needs more of you. Anyway, huge respect
Anybody
to the
that doesn't
dude.
know real quick, he was 2 Chainz's manager, helped blow him up. He's done a lot of other dope stuff in the music space. Look him up, Charlie Rocket. But Tesko, keep
much more fascinating than that, though. Fought brain cancer his whole life, beat that shit, was overweight, became a Nike athlete, and now is like training to be in the NBA. I believe that's his like current goal. And he goes really heavy on that topic of like manifestation and like writing your own future. He's very fascinating personality. What he achieved is super amazing. And I love the way he looks at certain things in music and life in general. There's one thing he talks about that I want to bring up called the little brother effect, which is the older brother, right, gets into his genre of music, whatever, and there's the little sibling, it doesn't matter, right? They grow up looking at their older sibling and they're like, oh, that's so cool. I want to listen to that. I want to be into that. I want to dress like that. And then they get to their teenage rebellious phase and they're like, oh, I don't want to be just like him. I want to be my own person. So then they go and they make weird ass music. They start dressing weird. If their siblings dressing in skinny, they're dressing in baggy, right? If their siblings listening to pop punk, they're like, I want more aggressive vocals. I want something Big Brother's going to hate.
Bro, that was my little brother for sure.
Yeah. So, and now you have generations of little brothers like hopping on that bandwagon for a while, getting into that, and then going through that phase of, you know, trying to find out who they are as a person and experimenting and chopping and screwing every single factor that they copied from the older sibling. And then that's how these new genres and new trends and whatever start to blossom up.
Yeah.
I really like that theory because I think a lot of artists too, like that are scared of copying people, you know, I think they get in that mindset of like, if I just, you know, if I'm influenced by this person, I'm going to grow up to be a carbon copy of them. And it's just not true. If you continue to do your own thing, you will find your own lane, and it's going to be something different, and it might be influenced by that, but you're going to, again, converge some different influences with that original influence that are going to just, you know, propel you to like a totally different lane.
Yeah, I think people just need to come to terms with the fact that all art is derivative. Like there is like your favorite most original artist in any lane, whether that be music or art itself, they're taking influences from their 10 favorite artists, and their 10 favorite artists took influences from their 10 favorite artists, or maybe even just 3. It's like there's some famous artists, I forget who said it, but it was like, you know, taking influence from one artist is copying, taking influence from 10 is creating original work or something like that. There's like, I butchered that, but that's the general idea of it, right? It's like coming up with a unique combination of your taste is original. That's the beautiful thing about it, is like it like, as long as it's true to you and you're not just like copying elements just because you think it's going to be a money grab, like the authenticity of you truly bringing in all of your favorite things and creating something with all of your favorite things, that's real. That is original. You don't have to necessarily think too hard about it as long as you're not fucking actually copying it.
100%. I want to pick your guys' mind on something, because I definitely went through a phase in the beginning where at first I was scared of becoming like my favorite artist, and then I remember I would like throw away ideas that didn't sound like my favorite artists, and I really wanted to be them. And I sort of had these periods where I really struggled. Like I couldn't like fathom having my own identity or being okay with writing my own style of music. Like I was like, I hear this thing and I really like it and I want to do exactly that. Like they've already nailed it. This is my thing. And then obviously, you know, years later, through just upping my skills and being exposed to more stuff and realizing I'll never be as good as whoever I was trying to copy, I became more comfortable with that. But I'm curious to hear about, you know, if you guys had that phase first off, and second off, how you sort of went about like becoming okay with your own sound and discovering what it was.
Yeah, when I first started making beats, it was all hip hop stuff because that was all I was listening to when I was 16 and 17. And you know, like if I could find my CD I used to listen to in my car, my first 20 beats, probably like 18 or 19 of them were like direct lifts off of somebody else, where I was like, oh, I'm going to make this track right here. I'm going to make Biggie and Bone, Notorious Thugs, except instead of the bass line doing it this way, it's basically like a reverse of that bass line. But like I learned to program that type of drum that day, and I learned how to analyze a bass line and rewrite it. And you know, like none of them were super original. I remember like it was my second beat I ever made was super like Tupac, Ambitions of a Rida. And like it didn't have the same melody at all, but it was like a similar rhythm with a piano as the lead instrument. And, you know, like on the one hand, it was the first one that ever got rapped over. My buddy wrote a whole song to it. And then later me and my other buddy wrote a whole nother song to that same beat, and we both put them out. on our first CDs. And, you know, most people just really like that beat. Like, oh, this is one of your best beats out of these first 20. And one friend that first rapped on it was like, oh, your friend Jack Tupac, I'm mad about that. And I was like, I didn't like Jack him. I was like inspired by it, but I like made my own melody. Like, I don't know. And it's like the arrangement exercise, right? It's like, if you're learning, just figure out like what makes me dance, what makes me feel the feels. Let me break down why so I can break down how, so then I can synthesize my own ideas into that formula. Because all music is made with formulas.
Yeah. And I think that people often overlook that like one of the best ways to learn is try and copy your favorite songs. Like yeah, don't put out the copy of like the exact carbon copy, but like plenty of songs that I made earlier in my production career like started as me trying to recreate what this other artist did because I loved certain parts of it. I try and recreate those parts. I don't get them right. They don't sound the same. And in doing so, actually made something that sounded similar but different. And I'm like, oh shit, this actually gives me the idea to do this other thing. And then you have this whole new song that doesn't sound like the original that inspired you, but you learned some things along the way trying to recreate that thing. Even like Wolfgang Gardner, like many would hark him as like one of like the kings of like early complextro style stuff. He didn't even want to make that shit. He liked deep house. He was pressing deep house to vinyl and making a killing, and the vinyl industry fucking dried up, and he's like, oh shit, I'm not going to be able to fucking pay rent. Let me go on the Beatport Top 10, remake all of these top 10 electro complextro songs that are hot right now. And then after I've remade all 10 of those, I'll make my own. And guess what? He became really fucking good at that shit and became really successful. He was saying the first check that he got from Beatport after getting a #1 release, like, was in the tens of thousands. The first check he got after copying 10 people, taking what he learned and making his own.
Man, shouts out to ill.America. That's my goddamn jam. And that music video was so cool.
Oh my god, dude! One of the first shows that I went to, the video trailer for it was Space Junk by Wolfgang Gardner, and there was this like trippy Alice in Wonderland themed video, and because it was for Beyond Wonderland, and that shit is burned into my brain. And to think that those kinds of songs came from someone that was just literally like, I'm going to figure out how to do this by copying a bunch of other people first and then doing my own. Like that, like you need to understand, like that's part of what people do. But that being said, like using that as a learning tool is so powerful. And then the key difference is that he didn't copy song 11 and then release that as his own. He used everything that he learned to then sit down and be like, okay, so what are these people doing? They're doing this kind of thing and this kind of thing. Let me grab like this Vengeance sample and fucking do something similar. But as long as you have your own spin, and like what most people don't understand is that your own unique taste is going to put your own stamp on a style of something that is going to be different enough to differentiate you. Now, also that being said, no one wants Wolfgang Gardner light. Like Wolfgang Gardner had a different spin, like the darker tones, like the very clean, like saturated digital sounds that were like, you know, put in like melodies and chords that definitely had their own vibe, right? So you have to do your own spin on it. But I mean, it doesn't take that much to take something that exists and create something that people would say is original.
Amen. And with that, we are out of here. Peace out, humans.
Peace.
Bye.
I like it.
What's up, humans? It's Luke, your friendly neighborhood Trap Jesus. Thank you so much for watching our videos. We appreciate you. Remember to like and subscribe to our channels. And if you have any questions or topics that we need to cover on the show, put them in the comments. Appreciate you. Peace and peace among worlds.